Welcome back, everybody, to the Wild Faith Podcast. My name is Evan Bungham, and I have a very special guest for you guys here today. We have Jordan Yira, who is a land specialist here in Minnesota and covering the surrounding Midwest for doing habitat work. And without further ado, we'll just kind of bring him right in. We won't even go through the bio because he's here with us, and we're going to go through it. So, Jordan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you again for having me on the show today. Very excited to chat with you guys, and very thankful for the opportunity to be here.
I tell you what, man, like we were just talking kind of before we hopped on the podcast, this is one that we've been trying to line up for like a month and a half. And I feel like we've been playing the elusive game of like cat and mouse, trying to get each other on with their hunting schedules and family life.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's November. I totally understand. November is a time to be in a tree. So I'm glad that we could connect here when things are a little bit slower, but yeah, absolutely.
And before we get into it, I know we talked a little bit about this too, but man, you have a heck of a wall behind you.
Thank
You've
you.
got a lot of big deer, and you told me a little bit tell me about that caribou again.
Yeah, so that caribou right behind us actually came with the house. The guy that used to own it worked for the DNR, and he got it at an auction or something of that nature. And he's like, cool, I just leave it there. It's bolted on the wall pretty good. And we're like, heck yeah, you can. It's a great talking point, and the kids love it. And it's like you got a reindeer in your living room right
Love
by
it.
the fireplace. So
Love it.
fits the
And you
Christmas theme.
got the Christmas decorations up. You got I should have done that with my TV in the background. I'll have to like overlay it now because that's like such a smart idea.
Yep, I'm like, it's either that or I have a weird glare coming from the fireplace in the window. So yep.
Nice, cool. And the funny thing about this episode, this is actually the first solo episode I've done. Luke has done, I think, 3 without me, which seems weird, but this is my first one. So bear with me, everybody that's listening. I promise I'm going to do a good job, but very, very excited to have you on, Jordan. And, like we were talking about beforehand, you've had an absolute slammer of a deer season, and we will get into that and kind of all those fun stories. But before all that, though, I just want you to kind of walk me through a little bit, just kind of a brief background on you and maybe your family and like kind of where you're at with your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So, originally, both my parents actually are from Western Wisconsin. Grew up on smaller farms. So I actually lived there when I was, younger and a baby, and that's where a lot of our hunting ground still is in
Sure.
Western Wisconsin.
Whereabouts?
Polk County, right across the border, St. Croix Falls, Boston Lake
County,
area.
man. So, okay. So
Yep.
you've been around like Turtle Lake and like, I'm trying to think of Amory and yeah, I bow hunted out there quite a bit. It's pretty fun.
Absolutely. That's our stomping grounds. And, actually right after, yeah, so well, I'll get to that, I guess. But yeah, and then my parents decided to relocate to Hutchinson when I was younger. So that's where I went to high school. Spent the majority of my childhood, big farming, egg country.
Okay.
Lot of friends with some egg ground, and I had one friend that raised bison too, which was pretty cool.
That's sweet.
But yeah, basically, right, I met my wife at St. Cloud State. We both went to college. And then right after that, of course, we were like, what are our next steps? So we both moved back to Western Wisconsin, of course, to be next to the family farm and be next to the hunting ground. Why not? And we're, kind of commuting to the Twin Cities for our careers at the time, and realized that obviously that wasn't the lifestyle that we wanted to live forever, and not really how we wanted to raise a family. But kind of during that time is really where my passion for habitat improvements kind of started and kind of kicked off, because I realized that people over there, people all across the world love whitetails, but people over there are whitetail nuts. They want to do everything in their power to increase their success. And now I'm looking back at this, even when I was in high school, I was kind of trying to make food plots for people to gain permission and things like that. So I was a big bow hunter. So that's really, looking back, that's kind of how my habitat addiction and kind of passion started. Is I'm like, if I would do these improvements for people, I could gain permission, and it's helping them for their gun season. So I thought it was a win-win too. So that's kind of how I got into that. But yeah, long story short, so after, we made the decision one weekend that we're just going to move up to the Brain Lakes area about 6 years ago now. We haven't looked back, and we, since then added 2 little ones to our family. But at that time, kind of COVID was happening and things of that nature. And, I noticed that there wasn't really anyone that was doing habitat work in the Brainerd Lakes area specifically. So I kind of got the wild hair to start running with it again up here. It's a different area, different people. Then it's kind of the true Northwoods too, is something that I grew up hunting up in northern Minnesota too. So I kind of knew about it. But And then I got that wise decision. I might as well get my real estate license in the meanwhile, so then I can help these people buy and sell their land and then manage it as well. And that's kind of how the opportunity fell into my lap here in the Lakes area. And I, got to be or kind of create my own opportunity, become a land agent. I didn't have a whole lot of background on the sales side of things, but connect really well with people and, know a lot about whitetails and habitat. And I guess kind of one thing led to another. And now we're here almost in year 3, and it's really taken off. It's booming. I, very grateful and thankful for the opportunities that I've been presented with. And I never thought I would be at where I was today, but, a lot of behind the scenes and hard work and connecting with a lot of the right people. And obviously having a lot of those industry connections helped out a ton, kind of get me started and keep rolling where I'm at today.
Love it, man. That's awesome. And I was saying before that you're kind of living my dream. This is like my retirement gig. But I definitely
Yep.
gonna have to hit you up for getting some hunt land. I know we're in our first home, and hopefully in 4 years, hopefully the economy's kind of flipped back around, interest rates drop down again, and we'll be ready to buy a house and some land. So I tell you what,
For sure.
you picked an awesome place to come. My wife and I moved up here, I think 8 years ago now. It'll be this spring.
Okay.
And my wife's originally from Staples here, and I'm from southeastern Minnesota. So I think we've kind of bebopped around from the Twin Cities, moved up to like Merrifield area, went to
Sure.
Brainerd, and now we live on the west side of Baxter. And we love it, man. The cool thing I found out up here, I was so convinced when we first moved up here. I was like, man, there's no big deer up here. I'm like, there's no turkeys. I'm like,
Yep.
I'm leaving southeastern Minnesota. I'm just like, there's nothing up here. And I've come to find out that there's bigger deer up here, I think, and
Yeah.
there's even more turkeys, and there's
For
lakes
sure.
everywhere, and it's amazing.
For sure. And that you nailed it. Like, yeah, even like where I grew up in Hutchinson, like there's tons of deer, there's tons of big deer, there's a lot of good wildfire opportunities. When we went here, I was like kind of a culture shock, and then
Mm-hmm.
obviously I grew up hunting in, some primo ground in Wisconsin where you see 75 to 100 deer sit. I'm like, what the heck? But then up here, obviously you're hunting a lot thicker woods, and
Yeah,
the terrain's a lot different, topography is different. But when you see some, I mean, there's some absolute
some
toads
megas.
up here. Yeah, like I've ran into some pockets, even some ground that I hunt up in LaPorte too. That's like, is this thing a whitetail or is this a moose?
Mm-hmm.
Because this thing's huge.
Huge.
Yeah, like
People
just
don't understand
chocolate
it when I
rack
tell
and
them like body wise, like I'm like not just even here, even northern. It's funny because I laugh like people when I first moved up here. I was like, man, this is like northern Minnesota, and people are like, no, this is central Minnesota, like northern
yep,
Minnesota. You got to keep going, and
yep,
but the body sizes are just substantial. It's just crazy how much bigger they are. But and that's the funny thing. I always laugh when people are like, "Oh, it's a small deer," but it's like, well, that's a 275-pound deer. That deer is
yeah,
probably
that's a tank
lot bigger than you think with his rack.
for sure. That's what I noticed too. And it's like kind of I think another cool twist of it too is just I've hunted deer all over the Midwest, and to be honest with you, these or some of these northern Minnesota deer are way harder to hunt than anywhere else I've hunted.
They're
They're
ghosts.
smarter. Yeah, they're smarter. They're nocturnal. Their habitat's a lot different. It's you gotta be on your A game.
Well, I think, this kind of ties in a little bit too with you being a land specialist. And the one cool thing, for people that are interested in purchasing land, there's obviously lots of opportunities. Land's a little bit cheaper up here. But the cool thing that I've found that I love up here, just we're not ready to purchase land yet, but we'll be there someday. But the
Hmm.
public land opportunities that exist within central Minnesota, I'll just say, it's endless. It's crazy how many
Oh,
different
it's
opportunities there are to get out compared to like, from southeastern Minnesota. We have, I want to say there's like maybe 13 tracks. Yeah, we have, Whitewater, which is huge, but then there's just a bunch of
yep,
small off egg fields, tree lines. There's nothing really too crazy. Like up here, when we first moved up here, that's why I love the cross reference our Onyx and see what you have
yep.
for pins, because I feel like I've been on every piece of public within like a 60-mile radius of Brainerd. So
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's kind of the big reason. Obviously, we vacation here as a kids a little bit too, and just the lakes. But yeah, the public ground's really what attracted me because I love grouse hunting. I love
mhm.
just finding, and that's what I'll do in between appointments too in the fall. Like if I'm,
Nice.
got a full day, I'll just find a
Got to
chunk of public,
multitask.
hunt a trail, and go shoot some grouse in the meantime. And yeah, like you said, there's tons of opportunity. It's quite often actually I sell a chunk that's connected to either a state forest or a WMA or something like that, and that's a huge bonus. I mean, as a landowner, you're getting not only the 40 or 80 you're buying, but now you're getting
Hmm.
20,000 other acres of the Crow Wing or the Chippewa
Hmm.
another force like that, or even pillager too. And that's a huge bonus because I mean, yeah, they're hunted and pressured, but there's some really good hunting opportunities within there too.
No, for sure. And so tell me a little bit more about, and you were talking this a little bit before we hopped on, but a little bit more, obviously now you're kind of within your space and you've established yourself, but you talked a little bit
Hmm.
about having a little bit more roots kind of involved in the hunting industry. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I guess right after college, actually, one of my first jobs I've always been a huge outdoor nut. Every free moment I got in my life, that's what I've been doing is hunting and fishing. So I kind of took a shot and applied for this outdoor marketing company called Outtech at the time. They've
Hmm.
now switched names. But what it was is it was an umbrella company that would market Avian X, Zinc,
Sure.
Wild Game Innovations. There was another Burnett ground blinds at the time, Plano, Cape bow cases. So they were a big umbrella company, and I actually would go to trade shows for them. That was part of my job is, marketing and going to trade shows and meeting vendors and meeting with people like Shields and Cabela's and seeing what we could do, get into their stores and things like that. So I was, kind of living on the road a lot and doing a lot of traveling, which was amazing experience. Now I look
Hmm.
back at it. My wife and I liked it because we made up tons of connections and different, people within the industry too. And then from that opportunity, that was more of a kind of a full time kind of thing. And I realized that, I'm never home and I didn't get to hunt as much as I wanted to. So from there, I kind of just worked with some other selective companies. I worked with Browning trail cameras. I still do work with Browning trail cameras. I'll
Nice.
do some of their trade shows that are more local or in the Midwest. But that's kind of as needed part time kind of basis kind of thing. And then I did some stuff with Analogics down in Worthington for quite a while too.
Sure.
Now I do a lot more with Domain since they're good guys, and
Yeah, they're
I
good
know
people.
I know them personally too, and they're right there in Hudson, so I support their products and do a lot with those guys too when I can help out. But yeah, just kind of those experiences. I mean, it's a very big community, but very small at the end of the day. At all of these big trade shows, and it's a lot of the same companies and vendors and whatnot too. So you get to build a personal relationship with
Hmm.
those guys, and you always say, making connections and stuff, you never know where it's going to lead. And that's honest truth. I mean, a lot of these guys now are referring me clients, or they know someone that's looking for ground up here or somewhere in Minnesota. And then all of a sudden I get connected with them, and then they know someone. And it's just a huge spiral effect. And that's what's really cool kind of about my business too is, obviously I'm selling ground, but it's very hunting related too. And,
Yeah.
that's a sweet area to work in, obviously, when you combine business with passion.
I love it, man. That's awesome. You're living the dream. And
Yeah.
it's the funny thing too, and I'm sure you felt that because you said it a little bit, like people always think like once you get involved in the hunting industry, like all you do is hunt and hunt and hunt and hunt. And like there's that side of it though too, where it all of a sudden it turns into a job and that translation of you're not hunting as much as you want to. You're in that space, but you're not hunting as much as you want to. That's where I feel like maybe what you've transitioned into now is you've allocated a little bit more time for yourself to get out and kind of get your own schedule and do what you want and get it in the woods.
Yeah, dude, for sure. You nailed it. Like everyone thinks the hunting industry is what you see on TV, and that
Yep.
is probably 1% of it. A lot of it is the behind the scene, the business part of it, the manufacturing part, the
Mhm.
marketing, the strategizing, things of that nature. The TV part is, and we could get in that at a different time. That's a whole nother ball game.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
a lot of these guys are doing it for fun, and a lot of guys are, they're going to outfitters and because they need
Mhm.
to make because they got
They got
contracts that
they
they
gotta make content, man.
Yep, they got contracts on the outdoor channel that they need to shoot deer
Yep.
because they're have that space. So that's a lot different business side of it. And you kind of see a clash with that too within the industry, obviously, because there's these blue collar guys that are, doing this job, and then there's these so-called celebrities that not necessarily really celebrities. They just have, companies supporting them and
Yeah.
big pocketbooks that they're able to live these hunts and do these hunts. And that's, just like anything, there's a divide within, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know that the whole reason I chose this career path was for the flexibility that I want to be in a tree all November. And I think this is probably one of the most flexible jobs. You kind of make you get what you put into it. And even when I'm still in the tree stand, I'm still subconsciously working and closing deals and helping landowners, which is what I think is so cool. I'm actually getting paid to hunt in a way, you
Love it.
know?
No, that's awesome. So tell me a little bit more kind of just about like you talked a little bit about your roots kind of growing up where you cut your teeth in Wisconsin and kind of in Hutchinson there. But like, just tell me a little bit more, like, who is like an influence to you kind of getting, was it your parents? Did you get into it yourself?
Yeah.
Or obviously I know it sounds like you and your wife are a pretty deadly hunting duo, but just tell me a little bit,
Sure.
just kind of growing up, how that worked out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that's a really special kind of piece of the puzzle here too. And as far as I can remember, it really started. My dad and grandpa are huge outdoorsmen, Stu, and kind of what fueled that passion is. I'll always remember like my very first hunt. I was 4 years old, and it was actually Wisconsin gun season. And my dad's like, "Well, I'm gonna bring you out. You want to go out?" I'm like, "Heck yeah!"
Yeah.
So bundled up like a little marshmallow, and I still remember we had this birch. It was on a birch tree. It was kind of a homemade stand that my grandpa made a platform and just a ladder going up to it. That's probably like 10, 12 feet. I remember my dad. I was 4 at the time, so I couldn't climb a grown man ladder. Tied a tied a rope to my waist. My mom probably would have died if she would have known this, and actually pulled me up into the
Yep.
stand, and then sat me in the platform, tied me in the rope around the tree as kind of like a safety harness kind of deal. And he's like, "All right, just be quiet and like let's see what happens." There's an evening sit, and I remember, like a whole herd, like 20 does and fawns came running right to us, like right in front of us. And at that moment, I was just instantly like glued and hooked, like to see all those animals that close and have no idea that you're there. And being 4 years old, of course you want to say like, "Dad, shoot one" or something like that. But I
Yep.
just remember like, my dad told me to stay quiet. I'm going to stay quiet. It was probably one of the coolest experiences that I can still remember. And then, of course, I went the next year, and dad shot a buck, and I got to see all of that happen. And I was just, something I nonstop talked about. And I guess a little bit different in my family is like when it's hunting season, like my parents would take me out, a few days for Minnesota gun season. Like we're going to deer camp.
Yep.
Wisconsin deer season, you're missing the whole week because it lands on Thanksgiving. So like I was gone at school
Yep.
half of November too, but that's my family's passion and tree, and that's what I grew into. And now our kids, we're doing the same thing. We're taking them out of preschool, and they're coming with us to deer camp because some of
Love it.
those hands-on experiences and memories, those are things you don't get in a class. Not to bash school, but you just don't get those in a
No.
classroom or working or whatever. But those are some of my core memories. And then obviously I went fishing at an early age too, and still remember ice fishing and going fishing with dad. But that is one kind of core memory that has always stuck with me. And then kind of this year, we reciprocated that a little bit. Dawson, we took on one of the last days of gun season. We took him to our blind, and he's there for 10 minutes. He's like, "Hey, Dad, there's a deer." I'm like, "Holy smokes, yeah, there is." And then the plan was to do a little bit doe management too. And then, of course, a big doe walks out 30 yards in front of us in front of the blind. And Greta, my wife, I'm like, "You better shoot him." And she shoots him, and he got to experience all of that, and he got to find it and do the blood trailing. And it was a
Love
really
it.
full circle core moment there too. And kind of in the past, he's been young. He's, when he's 2 years old, I've had him out when I'm bow hunting. And if I shoot one, he'll blood trail it too. So just having him out there and involving him at an early age
It's the
it's,
funnest thing,
it's,
man.
it is. And just kind of experiencing it through their eyes too. Cause everything is, you shoot this, nice sized doe or nice sized buck, but it's just a giant,
Yep.
it's like a 300-pound deer. And to them, it means the world. And, it's just a whole nother experience seeing it through your kids' eyes too.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. Like, I know I started taking my daughter out when she was 2 turkey hunting with me, and she thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And like one of my favorite hunts was the hunt that we had, was me and Luke hunting together, and he had his boy with him, and we had 2 toms coming in on a rope, and they got within like 25 yards, and I just told Luke, I was like, "We got to shoot as soon as we get a chance. Otherwise, like as soon as the kids see him, like it's done." I just remember Nora standing up and like, "Dad, there's turkeys!" Like yelling really loud. I'm like, "Oh," and we're done. But
Yeah.
she's been with me on all my deer that I've shot the last couple of years now, and she's only 3.5. And I really wish this last weekend when I shot my buck, it was the funnest FaceTime that I've ever gotten, because she was so jacked for me that I shot a deer, and she was so mad that she wasn't there. And I was like, "Man, this is what it's all about." And I just think of like when I was a kid, same memories of you, where it's just like, and it's the funny thing you talked about your dad hoisting you up. I don't think I've
Yep.
ever heard that from anybody, because I have memories of my dad doing the same exact thing, climbing up into like a platform stand that he built, and he's just
Yep.
pulling me up with this rope, being just itty bitty.
Yep. Yep. You don't
Oh,
tell
that's
mom
awesome,
about
man.
that.
Nope. It's just like, hey, we got up there and we saw deer, and it was good. So,
And we're safe
and we're safe.
enough.
But tell me more about your family. So your wife and your kids, boys, girls.
Yep. Yeah. So Greta, my wife, actually, she grew up around a very outdoorsy family too, but she actually didn't start hunting until she met me, and she realized very quick that she wouldn't see me in the fall unless she started hunting. So, so she got into it. Yeah, yeah, 4 years ago, and the deer
Love
that you
it.
see behind me, that's a full body mount. That's her first or her second deer ever. She shot a 180 booner, and we decided to do a full body on
Oh
him
my
just because we had
gosh.
so much history with the deer, and he was just kind of a local legend. But yeah, she shot two monster bucks, and now this year I helped her get her first one with the bow, and it once she discovered the bow too, like that's a whole nother
Oh, it's a
addiction. But
game changer. You're done after that. It's just like
you
you're
know,
yep.
yeah, so she's addicted to that, and I think it's so fun to be able to hunt together and sit in a blind and share those memories and experiences. And she's seen me shoot a few bucks now too, and it's special sharing that with other people and especially family.
No, oh yeah, got a little chirper here behind me, but no, I love that, and my wife's come out with me a couple of times. She shot a turkey with me and shot a deer with me, and then after that, she just looked at me and she's like, "I'm done, I'm good." I'm like, "All right, that's fine. It's like whatever you want to do," but I'm really
Yeah,
hoping that my daughter will continue on to come with me, but I'm not going to force it on her. But we have another girl on the way too, which is really exciting. But hopefully she'll like
sweet,
to do the outdoors too. So, but that's awesome. I mean, like that's what it's all about.
absolutely.
You know, getting your family involved, and especially if if it's a hard one not to pass on. If your wife's wanting to come out bowing with you, it's like, all right, we'll buy you a bow, we'll get going. And I just
Yep, yep.
the fact that she's so tell me, and we can kind of go down that rabbit hole now too, because before we jumped on the podcast, just for everybody knows that your family has had an absolute slammer of a year for killing deer. Like I would love to know your taxidermy bill just because of the deer that you guys have killed. But
Yeah, it's not
beginning
pretty,
of the
but it's a good
season
write
though,
off.
walk me through like so I can't remember if you shot your deer first or if your wife shot her deer first and then it was kind of
Hmm.
just a snowball effect after that. So just
Yeah,
tell me about all those hunts.
yeah, for sure. And sorry, I part of the question I forgot to answer too. So we have Dawson, he's 4, and then Presley,
Okay.
she's 3, and both of
Love
them are
it.
just like we don't really push it, but they're just like
Yeah. I mean,
they're just
yeah.
addicted. Like they just love coming with and experiencing it. And like today, my son's like, "Dad, can we go ice fishing?" I'm like, "Heck yeah, we can go
Yeah.
ice fishing."
You
So
bet.
we're going ice fishing after this.
Nice.
Yeah, so this was a dream season, to be honest. And I think a lot of that I owe to kind of the crew that I chose and just making some of those property improvements.
Mhm.
So I did a lot of habitat and TSI work last spring and early summer, and then obviously redesigning some of our food plots and then we got a muddy blind because my wife's a freeze baby. So I'm like, oh, perfect, another excuse to get
Yep.
a nice enclosed blind.
Yeah, that'd be
But
nice.
so I kind of designed this little kill plot around where we put that new stand, but I also did a lot of TSI work to knowing that there's bedding close by and knowing that we're sitting in kind of oak flat and it's all where we hunt in Wisconsin. It's all the rolling hills and a lot of ridges, kind of like southeast a little bit, but not as extreme. But yeah, where the spot is, it's in between two ridges. There's bedding on both sides, or there's bedding on the one side, and then north of us the access was perfect. But anyways, I had this buck, didn't even really name him. He was a stud 8 pointer last year that I was actually kind of torn about shooting all year. I mean, he was only a 3.5-year-old, but he was a stud 3.5-year-old. And it was,
Sure.
you just come by every time. And I'm like, you know what? One more year, he's going to blow up. So, um, and I always, for me, a goal was to shoot a 4.5-year-old and
Mhm.
up too, but it was a tough year last year. So he was looking tasty, but I knew if I could just give him that extra year. But
Yep.
got tons of pictures of him in the summer, and he was consistently coming to the spot on a south or southeast wind. So then when archery season rolled around, I woke up. It was a Monday. It was on the 23rd, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be a southeast wind, and it's going to be absolutely perfect to access this stand. So I headed out to Wisconsin. Probably left here at like 1. Got there about 3 or got there about 4 p.m. Climbed up in the stand, and by 5:30 he read the script perfect. Came right up the ridge, kind of rated him to the oak flat. Gave me a 25-yard broadside shot. I just drilled the shot, smoked him. My target buck for the year. Yeah, he ended up going 140, 142.
Love it.
And one of my biggest with the bow. And I was just, it was kind of bittersweet. That was my first hunt. I hunted for like 2 hours, an hour, not even. And I was like, crap, now I'm tagged out. And like Wisconsin's my baby. Like I hunt the rut hard there.
Yeah.
because you can, their gun season's not till the third week. So you get the primetime rut, this experience with the bull. But then I was like, well, my gear's switching now that we're going to get Greta her first bull buck. She's never shot a deer with the bow. So we headed out then October, kind of one of my favorite times to hunt, right that weekend before Halloween, or that
Yeah.
last week in October is always just money. I mean, they're doing all their pre-rut stuff. They're
Oh, yeah.
daylighting, they're fired up, they're ripping up trees, making scrapes, grunting. And sure enough, like our first morning sit, I think we saw 12 or 11 different bucks fighting, running around. Like, it was insane. So then we slipped out kind of midday and, went and got something to eat. I'm like, all right, we're going to sit in the same spot again, the same spot I killed my buck. Because you can just see, they just cruise the ridges nonstop.
Yeah.
And it had been like 5:30, just started to get dark or whatever. And this really nice buck, I'm like, I've never had history with him. He was cruising the ridge and he was just kind of bumping does around and just kind of, trying to mark his territory. I'm like, I think I could grunt this thing in, and he's like 200 yards away. So I just started ripping the grunt call, just like small grunts, just to kind of tick him off. And his ears pinned back instantly, and he just V-lined right towards our stand, coming up in ridges, coming down, and then trying to go downwind of us. I'm like, Greta, you better get ready. Like, he's coming. Like all of a sudden he's 100 yards and he's 40 yards. I'm like, all right, you better draw. And all of a sudden, boom, he's 20 yards broadside in front of us. I'm like, draw. And she was so excited that I could just hear her like arrow shaking in the quiver, because she's never, drawn back on a deer. And all of a sudden she finally just like, I don't know what she did, but she just ripped it back. And I'm like, all right, perfect. I'm like, just wait. So I had the window like slowly opened. I'm like, all right, just wait 2 seconds. And he's going to be right in front of her. And as soon as he stepped out in the like perfect broadside shot, she just drilled him. And like, he instantly like hunched up and like went like 50 yards and just tipped over right in front of us. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that just happened. Like, it was so cool. And like, I have a video of him too, like coming in, like just grunting and just like kind of walking the king of the woods at the time. And he ended up being a 12-pointer. He had split G2s on both sides, like looked like kind of like a
giant.
Yeah, it looked like a mule deer buck. And that was her, like that's her first bull buck ever. I'm just like, what the heck? Like, this is just insane.
First one's a giant. It's just like, oh. But I tell you what, though, that's like how it goes. I mean, like, it's like the people, like, I don't know if that's like divine intervention or just God working in ways to get people into it. But like, think of like her giant, that 180 she shot, and then shooting a giant with her bow for the first one too.
And props to her too, because she really gets the management and the conservation part of it. She's like, I'm not shooting a puke buck. I'm not shooting a year and a half. I'm not shooting a 2.5. I'm shooting a buck that I'm going to be happy with. That's not going to, potentially stunt. Obviously, he would have been a mega next year, but she's like, I'm going to shoot one that I'm going to be really happy with. That's going to be a mature buck. And I'm like, you know what? Props to you, because a lot of people, even our age, don't have the self-control to do stuff like that. And
oh, for sure.
But yeah, she's patient and she capitalized, and same thing, first sit there. So we were just absolutely spoiled. So then, I still got my Minnesota tag burning a hole in my pocket. I hunt up in LaPorte. I got a spot that I hunt, obviously back behind our house, hunt a little bit. And I had a lot of bucks on camera, but I actually was selling this 20-acre chunk in Brainerd. And the guy doesn't live in he lives actually out west. And he's like, you know what, if you want to bow hunt, go for it. So I'm like, all right, cool. I had some cameras running out there, and got some decent bucks right away. And it was November 1st. I climbed in the tree for an evening hunt, and lo and behold, there's a small buck kind of cruising, and all of a sudden a group of does coming by, and they looked like they kept looking back. So I'm like, sweet, got ready, and here this 8-pointer was just pushing him, and he was just a brute of a body. Like, he was probably only a 3.5-year-old deer, but he was just, like we were talking about, just a massive northern deer.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
huge.
I'm like, what? Like, this thing, I'm like, at first I saw his body. I couldn't see his rack because he was behind all kinds of brush and stuff. I'm like, this thing's a mega. Like, he's got to be. And then so I ripped the grunt because he wouldn't come out in the opening. And then all of a sudden, same thing. Ears pinned back, boom, braced on the tree, 5 yards underneath my tree. I literally drew as he was coming back because his head was like, I'm kicking this whatever buck's in the area. So I literally shot him like directly underneath my tree.
Oh, boy.
And I'd rather shoot 20, 30 yards all day, but like straight underneath these shots they're hard.
People talk about that a lot. Like, that's a like, there's that sweet spot between, I'd say, about like, I don't know, it's whatever you practice, I mean, like, practice. No one practices a vertical shot straight down.
No. And then you're like worried about like, crap, am I going to hit the platform in my stand? Am I going to like, there's a whole nother twist to it. So I'm like, kind of like trying to figure this out. And like, there's no other shots behind me. So if he goes by me, like it's now or nothing. And finally, he kind of like took a step back, I think, to kind of, kind of scan the area. And I ended up just drilling him kind of straight underneath shot, and I double lunged him, and it was perfect.
Love it.
And he just took off, and I heard him crash, and it got dark pretty quick there, and I knew I nailed them, but where I was hunting, it's like creek bottom stuff, So in the dark, I couldn't really find any blood, but I'm like, I heard him crash. My arrow buried in him. I'm sitting there looking at the flashlight and stuff. I'm like, you know what? We're just gonna wait till the morning. We're gonna bring out the family, and
Smart.
thank goodness I did too, because I brought out the family, and there he was, like dead right where I heard him. But it added a whole nother fun experience to it.
Well, that's fun bringing them along with the two, and I think that's the common rookie mistake. Like I just have such vivid memories of like my dad. Is growing up as a kid. My dad was a big hunter, but not like wouldn't say he was the wisest of the woods. Of where it'd be like we'd shoot a deer and be like, just go get it right away. And it's like, well, no, we should wait. Like if you're not sure, like
Right.
like when in doubt, back
Right.
up.
For sure. And yeah, I'm a huge advocate, especially with bow hunting, because I've seen some wild stuff. And actually, that one right above, right there, that buck, I actually shot him lung and liver and waited like 4 hours to track him. And I jumped him in his first bed, and he was still alive. And then all of a sudden, I waited another 4 hours, and he died right where I last saw him. But I'm like, that's just after
It's
experiencing that,
amazing
I'm
their
like,
will to survive. And
for
especially like a mature whitetail, like they will go through hell and back. And like I've killed a lot of muleys, and I joke about this because I've also had extremely bad luck the last 3 years with hunting muleys and shoulder shots and stuff. But I've always laughed because I'm like, you shoot a muley, I'm like, they're like, oh, they're dead. They're like, oh, I'm dead. But like I look at like whitetails though, then they just the drive that they have to survive is insane.
It's amazing. Like even that 180 that my wife shot, he was hit 3 different years. Like he had a broadhead in his back, he had a huge pus pocket in his neck, and he actually, the coolest part of that story, we can talk about probably that deer forever, but he was hit by a car the beginning of November and just completely disappeared from everything. So when she shot him, he was in rough shape. Like his whole shoulder and neck was all like gangrene, like infected. Like he was like and it was kind of the not coolest hunt ever. All of a sudden we just look and he's on the main tractor trail in front of us. Like we didn't know where he was, probably just bedded down, like, slowly dying, not doing well. But yeah, kind of speaking of survival will, that deer he'd been through everything, and he was still kicking.
That's what amazed me. Like you see the taxidermist and they'll show you like, like what is all in it. Some of these deer, and especially like those highly populated states with hunters like Wisconsin and some of the, geographically in certain areas within Minnesota, but like, man, there might be a deer with 4 broadheads in it, and he's still cruising around, or he might have been shot 2 or 3 times and still alive and kicking. It's like, it's insane.
Right. Well, even that buck, so that was my first archery buck ever. A kind of same thing. I was waiting forever and a day, and he grew a third main beam. And the reason being, the year before, when he was a stud 8-pointer, I shoulder shot him. Shot him at 25, 30 yards, high shoulder. I was only pulling back like 60 pounds at the time, and he snapped my arrow, and we tracked him for 400 yards, never found him again. The next year, in the same spot, basically the same day, right before Halloween, he came back, same identical shots, up this time I put it in the crease. And then when we're caping them out, I found my broadhead from the year before.
Nice. Yep. It's just crazy how they can heal like that and like survive, and just like they just make do. And then, I mean, this is where I think we'll definitely have to have you on a couple more podcasts, because we could make this a 4-hour podcast talking about like actual hunting tactics. I know we're kind of out of that realm of season now, but like it does amaze me though too, of like, you get a particular buck, and every buck has their own personality and how they act and stuff. But it is crazy though, that is, you come to that certain time of year of, it could be early season, middle of the season, late season, where it's like, it's like this deer is going to show up on this day within this window. And usually 80-90% of the time they do that exact same thing. It's amazing how their internal clock can work like that.
Dude, you know that big buck too, we called Hank the Tank. Same thing. We have 4 years of history of that deer, but the only time that there's specific dates he'd come by, and it'd be October 26th through, mid-November, and then he'd disappear. We'd get him every once in a while in January, February with one side. But yeah, that was like his core window was the prime rut. Like he liked our woods to rut in, and that was it. Like he would roam everywhere else, but that was just his time.
And, so with your Minnesota deer, and then I know you traveled to Nebraska too, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my biggest to date. That was I actually not being able to shoot a deer on the first sit was kind of a shell shock to me, but um we grinded. So yeah, I was taking out Minnesota and Wisconsin, or archery wise, at least in Wisconsin. So I'm like, I need to find somewhere else to hunt. Like this is a rut. Like where can I get over the counter take? So I did some searching and I'm like, you know what? I hunt a turkey hunt in Nebraska a lot. I've always seen a lot of deer. I'm like, let's do it. In the zone I was at, it was kind of like north central. So there's a lot of mule deer and whitetail, but a lot
Yeah.
less mule deer, you know?
Yep.
Um, so I'm like, let's do that. I've never shot a mule deer. So that was appealing to me. And there was a fair amount of public ground there, not a whole ton. So I knew there was going to be pressure, but I like doing some online scouting and kind of knowing the area too. I'm like, if we can get way back there, I think we'd have a good shot just based on how the terrain's set up. And there's a
Yeah,
lot of
for
egg
sure.
fields obviously out there. First day we did, I mean, we woke up 3 o'clock in the morning, first one there at this huge 2,000 acre chunk. And like, we were all the way in the back corner where all the egg fields were. And we saw probably 30, 35 deer right off the bat, whitetails, but a
Yep.
lot of nice whitetails. And then and all of a sudden, more people we started seeing and started kind of kicking deer over. And we're like, let's try some other spots. So then like, yeah, basically we were there for probably only 5 days, but we finally really figured out the spot that, every evening they're coming from the public to go in the egg fields, but it's right on the fence line, like right on, like you'd be right on top of them, or, you're shooting them in private. So we figured that out. And there was a really nice whitetail that I wanted to shoot, probably like a 130 10 pointer. And the night before, it must have been a local or someone saw the same thing that we did. So they started like walking in the middle through this huge draw because it's all, rolling hills
Oh
and
yeah.
cedars and little draws. And
It's
started
beautiful.
walking in the middle of through the middle of the draw. And of course, he kicked everything out. And I'm like, well, this kind of sucks. So,
Gotta love
anyways, like
public hunting.
yeah, I'm like, we were just defeated at that point. Like we saw a ton of deer, had some opportunities at smaller ones. And then we met some guys up there too that were actually from Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Nebraska, and they're like, "Hey, come to this." They called it like this little post office. It was an old post office that this guy bought, and he kind of created it as a deer camp, like people to come,
Oh,
kind of like
sweet.
a potluck kind of thing. And
Yeah.
like, I'm like, sure, that's awesome. So everyone's like sharing food, and they had some cocktails and things like that. And this guy's like, and I know this guy too, and he's like, man, I feel really bad. You guys been here. It's not really the Nebraska way. Usually we don't have a ton of pressure. And we saw some hunt lines too, which was kind of discouraging because they're really,
Really?
yeah, they're really starting to migrate because all the kind of stuff that happened this summer in Wyoming
Huh.
and Montana with forest fires. And then, of course, we learned too that the population's just getting out of control in like the Pine Ridges out in Nebraska. So
Yeah.
they're all kind of moving east. And they said the deer number EHD hit bad there too. So we were just very
Mm-hmm.
discouraged after all this. And he's like, you know what? I have this chunk. It's 240 acres. It's kind of close to public. Go hunt it. He's like, it's just, it hasn't been hunted in a
That's like
while.
Minnesota nice, but Nebraska nice.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay. He's kind of showing me an Onyx. He's like, you got to open like 6 cattle gates, and then all of a sudden you're gonna come there. It's gonna be some pasture ground, and then there's gonna be some cedars. I'm like, you know what? This is better than public. So sure.
Yep.
So I did it, and I tucked into the cedar tree as the sun came up, and right off the bat I saw a buck. I'm like, oh sweet, this is awesome. And then all of a sudden I saw a half rack come by. I'm like, wow, these deer are pretty aggressive, and I've heard that out there too. Because what we saw is the whitetails would always run off the mule deer.
Yeah.
Whenever a mule deer
Really?
would see a Yeah, whenever a mule deer would see a whitetail, they'd be like, I don't want anything done. Like, because the whitetail are a lot more aggressive,
Yeah.
we learned too. And the locals said, yeah, whitetail will kick all of these mule deer's butts. Like they want nothing to do with it. So I'm like, okay, well, that's promising. And then, it was about 8:30, and all of a sudden I just heard, I was sitting on a ridge, and there's a draw underneath me, but I couldn't see into the draw. And I just heard 2 bucks just going at it, like roaring, grunting, just antlers. And it was a crisp, like 20-degree
Crazy.
morning, just going. And I'm like, holy smoke. So I kind of got ready, and I saw a tail just take off into the thicket. I'm like, oh, well, that stinks. One of them I couldn't see. And all of a sudden I heard grunting. And I'm like, holy smokes, 50 yards up the hill. All of a sudden I just saw this cage coming. And the sun was shining right at him, so he couldn't really see me tucked in the cedar. But he knew like something, like an outline
Yeah.
wasn't right there. So he kind of like came up the hill and then kind of like walked back. And when he walked back and turned his head, I clicked off my safety and just pulled up to him freehand and just drilled him. And he ended up being a 154 inch 9-pointer that didn't have brow tines. He broke off both with his brow tines. So
Jeez.
he would have went 160, no problem. So yeah, my biggest by far. And it was the last day sit. We were debating on not even going out. And yeah, super, super thankful for that. It was just another incredible moment that I just never thought would have happened, and just very thankful for that, how everything laid out, and all of a sudden we're going home with the biggest deer I ever shot, and
Love it.
now we're on to Wisconsin deer camp because it's just that's just the time of the year. So got home from Nebraska, went straight to Wisconsin deer camp for another 9 days, and time to grind again. So that's and then Wisconsin deer camp was a good time. A lot kind of the latest it's ever laid out historically speaking. It was opener was like on the 23rd or however it laid out. So they were done full chasing.
Yeah.
We still saw some chasing, but not those big guys were kind of just in recovery mode, starting their winter patterns. A lot of herds of does. So saw a lot of nice potential deer and upcomer, and that's when we decided, like, all right, let's take out some of these does since there's so many of them. So we did that with our son Dawson, and then I debated about going out with a muzzleloader, and I saw a lot of nice deer on cameras, and I'm like, you know what, they made it this far. Let's let them live.
Yeah.
There's nothing I want to shoot or need to shoot. We have plenty of meat. Like, let's just let these deer keep growing. So I kind of called her quits after that. I still got some bonus tags I could fill here too, but I'm at the point where I'm like, you know what, they made it this far. Let's just let them live.
Love it, man. I mean, but still, like going off, that's a crazy season, though. I've heard of a couple. I know my brother-in-law's had a couple of years like that where we just had wild runs of killing deer, and I want to say we had one like that maybe about 5 or 6 years ago with our family. I think we shot like four shooter bucks and tagged out for does, and it was just like a season. It's like, wow, did that really just happen? But that's kind of like with you guys. I mean, that's an incredible season for you guys.
For sure, and I think, what made it even more, kinda rewarding too is, like, I haven't shot a buck the past 2 years with my bow because 'cause I've been so selective, and I'm like, "I'm gonna hunt the rut," and hunting the rut is, to me, I mean, it's fun, but it gets
It's a
hard.
grind,
I mean, if you can get a good mature buck pattern easy early on, it's so much more
hundred
predictable.
percent.
Whereas I'd like bank all my time to hunt the rut, and I'd see all kinds of bucks, but I'm like, half those I can't even shoot because they're chasing, they're in a whole nother ball game, or it's just you may see a bunch of deer,
So,
you may not.
would you rather, and I think I know the answer in my head, but I'd be curious to what you say. Would you rather, just coming from another habitat, land specialist, I like to think of myself, would you rather kill the deer that you've had patterned, saying like up until Halloween, because usually that's about the break off point,
Yep.
or would you rather kill a no name rando buck that's just cruising the rut?
Yeah, that's tough because I've definitely done both, but I would say for sure I'd rather hunt that last week of October and at least
Yeah.
have some predictability, because then also you get some guys you never seen too that are kind of like
Yeah.
they're getting kicked out of their areas. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like, I don't know. I like the pre-rut a lot better than the rut for that reason, because you're starting to get their areas are starting to change, right? So
Yep.
a lot of these other bucks are either looking to fight other ones, or they're looking at making different territory where you sometimes get a lot of bucks you have no history with too to come cruise by. But at least, like you said, I mean, once you know their kind of core area, they usually try to make it known
Yeah.
that's their area before they start chasing. So yeah, I would definitely say, kind of my experiences and learning now, I'd rather hunt that last week of October than
Okay.
hunt the rut,
Yeah.
because it's just such a gamble. I mean,
It
the
is.
rut is amazing to hunt, and don't get me wrong, I will do it till the day I die. But for my like a killing standpoint, if you're trying to kill a mature deer, it makes it definitely tougher.
So, kind of dive in a little bit back, and I know we've been jumping around over here, but I wanted to go through that story just because you had such a incredible season. So, kudos to you guys again. But I want to dive a
Thanks,
little
man.
bit back into the habitat side of things. So, kind of break me down a little bit of like how you break down a property, and this could be, you going through it and getting a new property for for your real estate side, or this could be on the land specialist side of where you're going to break down a property for a client, or if it's for yourself, like what are the steps you kind of from start to finish that you're going through to kind of set that up for success?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say kind of the first step in, yeah, I'm just gonna give you kind of the general rundown. So obviously looking
Sure.
at, like on X and doing a lot of aerial scouting, seeing what topo you're working with, seeing what kind of what's in the surrounding areas, if you're surrounded by egg or swamps, or if there's creek or water on the property, things like that. And then next step is putting boots on the ground, kind of covering the whole like that's why the winter time and kind of like after the season is my favorite time to walk properties, because you can see a lot of that sign from the fall, and you can see a
Yeah.
lot of fresh sign too, and it's a lot more walkable. You're not walking through a jungle that you can't even see or what's going
100%.
on. So I like to put boots on the ground, the whole property, get as much intel from all of that sign that I've seen, and then kind of look at no matter what, your access is going to be the most critical part of any property. If you can't access it without blowing everything out, you might as well just, hunt the parking lot kind of deal.
Hmm.
So it really starts off with finding how, because there's a lot of hidden gems and properties that aren't accessed, which is okay. Like the best in my personal properties, the best hunting or the best habitat is the stuff we don't hunt, because that's their sanctuary, that's their safe spot.
Yeah.
But we hunt the outsides of that, and we're not blowing it out. They're
Yep.
safe there. They're going to come out of there eventually. So yeah, kind of setting up that, like making sure that access is going to be flawless, making sure that no matter on what kind of winds, that we have different opportunities to hunt different stands. So, when I'm working with a client for, say, helping them kind of determine how they hunt first off, are they archery hunter, gun hunter, do they do both? And then kind of determining, from that access where their stands are going to give them the best opportunities. And then from there, well, you really like this spot and it's really easy to access. How can we build that habitat around it to make that spot better? And then from there, I'm a big fan of TSI work. I mean, I think it's so overlooked.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's so quick to food plots. Yeah, food plots are great. Yeah, they like to eat them and stuff. But
Gotta have the
if you don't
cover.
have,
Gotta have the
yeah,
cover.
yeah, if you don't have the cover and the habitat around it, those mature deer aren't even going to use the food plots. And I
Yeah.
found that out very early on when I was younger, started getting into the food plots too. Whereas now, like my best food plots are those small kill plots that have just loads of cover around them, and they feel safe, and it's kind of somewhat close to bedding, but not too close.
Hmm.
And they feel safe, secure. They can go in there, eat, and then they can go slip out. Whereas like a lot of these big egg fields or big, huge food plots, a lot of these mature deer don't like to come out until like last light or first
Yeah.
light, things like that. So, kind of finding a happy medium with that too. Obviously, every property kind of lays out different, and then using the topography to your advantage too. A lot of guys, just because it's lower ground is great. I mean, as we all know, Dan Infault and some of those
Oh
swamp
yeah.
guys, there's big deer that live in swamps, and
Oh
people,
yeah.
and I hear it every day, like, oh, that property's got too much swamp, I don't want it. I'm like, yeah, but look at all the deer sign going in there and out of there. Like, they like that stuff because it keeps them safe. You're
Hmm.
not going to hunt it, but hunt smart and hunt around it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, breaking down the property. I mean, and it's a lot of, I would say the biggest thing that people overlook is, and a lot of these habitat guys even do it too, and they'll admit to it, is not putting enough boots on the ground and actually seeing firsthand what's going on. Because you can see a lot of these like natural browse and stuff that they're eating. You can see and tell pretty quick what they're eating, what they're liking, what they're not. And then, a lot of the trees, like, okay, that one could be hinged or that one needs to be taken out. All right, we can build up the habitat here. Just getting that, latest information of what they're already using and then building off of that too and I think you can really, there's been a lot of properties I've sold too that have been kind of like, you think subpar properties, but you get someone with a good mentality and put some sweat equity into it. Now that person's shooting giant deer because they created that habitat, what it needed to be to get to that point.
So what do you think's the unique property value? And obviously I know the answer to this question, but I was just hearing the statistic that was said the other day. Someone was talking about, most people that try doing habitat work still end up only using probably like 10 or 15% of what the potential of the property is. Like, what's the beneficial value of like someone for you to come step foot on their ground?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, I mean, say someone buys like just a property that's never been, nothing's done to it. And if we'd come in there, implement a plan, get that plan going, get a history of deer and stuff, I mean, the numbers come in astronomical. I think I've made guys upwards. They bought a property for $100,000, 80 acres, and then we turned around and we sold it for $400,000 in 2 or 3 years. So, I mean, there's huge. I mean, there's huge financial
Oh,
gain
for
out of it
sure.
too, and it just depends how much sweat you're willing to put into it, or
Yeah.
how much willing you're. Obviously, it costs money to do a lot of those things, like make the trails and food plots and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you're willing to put the sweat, the time into it, and get a history of deer, and actually build a property to its fullest potential, I think there's, and everyone wants. Majority of people want a turnkey property, right?
Yep.
And a lot of people are willing to pay for that aren't from necessarily our areas. So there's definitely a huge demand of it. But yeah, I would say any habitat improvements that you're doing to your property, it's only going to help your return as a landowner,
No,
not only to your success, but financially too.
No, I love that. And we'll have to, like I said, I'm excited that we were doing this podcast because we'll have to do a couple more. And I definitely want to do just a separate habitat TSI improvement one, and maybe someday get you come down to our farm. But, kind of just moving along with that. And I know like this kind of gets you going, which is awesome. But just tell me a little bit, like, what does that mean to you to be able to help somebody acquire a property, like going through like that process of like helping someone find their dream property, because obviously that's got to be a fun bit for you too.
Dude, yeah, for sure, and that's it really I never in a million years thought I'd be a salesperson, never wanted to be a salesperson, and I still don't run my business like I'm a used car salesman, I never will.
Hmm.
It's just the farm kid and the countryside of me is I my how I run my whole business is, um, creating relationships and getting people on their goals and treating people right. And a big part of that is when I get to help someone find their first, like, property ever, just to see get the wheels spinning and knowing that I'm not only just selling them property, I'm selling them memories of a lifetime.
Hmm.
Cause like that's a huge thing with our family is like we got our hunting ground, but we're never going to sell it because that's memories of a lifetime out there.
Amen to that.
Um, and just seeing that too, and when it's a dad and son or a family, and just seeing them be all giddy, like, oh, we're gonna
Oh
have a
yeah.
stand there, we gotta do that, we gotta have deer camp, like that's what I'm in it for, is just getting to help into that phase and helping them get to that point too. And actually a cool story here, I just sold that 20-acre chunk that I hunted in Brainerd, and I wasn't even I was a listing agent, and the buyer agent couldn't make there. He's like, can you show this guy like the property lines before we close, just so he knows? I'm like, absolutely, not a problem. And he brought his son out there, and he was like, it was the first property they ever bought.
Oh, cool.
And he was just so excited. Like, him and his son finally have some private ground that they can hunt, that they can make food plots in. And it's only 20 acres, but it's a good 20 acres. And like, I'm like, hey man, I gave my whole plan. Like, here's where I had my stands. Here's where I have my cameras. They come from the
Yeah.
north, the swamps there. And he was just so appreciative of that and like so excited. And that's what gets me going too, is like just knowing that, and kind of helping people get to that point in that process, and then making sure they're well taken care of too. And that something cool that I offer my clients is like, I'll virtually kind of set up, since I've been out on the property, I'll help
Yeah.
set it up the property too, as we're kind of going through it. And like, as a
Love that.
closing gift, a lot of time I'll give them like a map and kind of have it drawn out, what you could do, what you should do. Simple things that's not going to cost a whole lot of money on their end, just a lot of sweat. And people love that, and they now they got a turnkey hunting camp in the works. So yeah, there's just the most rewarding part is, yeah, people having people find their ground, and then also selling like some of these family legacy properties that some uncertain circumstances have happened,
Hmm.
either with death, or they're at the point where their kids don't want it anymore, and that obviously that property has had years and years of history and memories. And that's something emotionally that I take in count too, is like, man, this, like, I couldn't even imagine. And really making sure they're well taken care of, and that property is presented at the best of its ability, and making sure that the next person buying it's going to be a good fit for it, not gonna come in and burn it all down or develop
Oh
it.
yeah.
And nothing breaks my heart more is like selling a piece of ground and then seeing it be split up and developed. Like, I just
It's
from a
so
conservation.
hard to see. And it happens
Yeah.
so much more and more as time goes on, and like I look at like our farm, like, like my dad's passed, it's been 3 years ago now. And it's like, at the same time, I look at it for my kids. I look at it for my sister's kids, and hopefully my brother and my other sister, and they have kids. So like, and that's what fires me. Obviously, like, I want to use our property and hunt too. But the thing that gets me fired up, like doing all the TSI work and putting food plots in and just getting the farm better than it was, is like, I want my kids, and I want their kids, and I want their kids to be able to enjoy this property just like my dad set it up. Because like, that's the cool thing you talk about from just like the habitat perspective. Like, our farm that we had was a complete blank slate. It was just CRP ground. And I think my dad through the years planted, I don't know, upwards of like probably 25,000 trees we planted all together as kids. And we just kind of
Wow.
built this farm out, and it's fun to
It's
see where it's
amazing.
got now, but there's still tons of work that needs to get done. But like,
Yep.
you talk about like legacy farms, and it's just so sad to see that happen, but it does. I mean, it's just a way of life, but
Yep.
hoping, and that's where it's just cool. I find out that you can kind of connect that and find that next piece, because the cool thing about the ground kind of lives on forever. It doesn't go away,
Yep.
unless it gets developed into the houses and stuff. But it's cool to be able to pass that from family to family and make sure that it's getting used like it was designed to be used.
For sure, and that's like a big part. Like, I'm selling every day. I'm out selling memories and selling
Hmm.
dreams. Like, that's what's kind of cool to think
Love that.
about. Sometimes you don't think of it that way, but I'm like, in reality, that's what it is. Like, and that you nailed it too. Like, with your family farm, like, when my dad bought our chunk, so my mom and dad grew up in the same area. My
Yeah.
mom's family farm was kitty corner for where this chunk went for sale. Well, this chunk went for sale by the logger because the logger logged every mature tree out of it. So like our best hunting ground that we have now, 120 acres was logged. Like everything was clear cut.
Clear
Like
cut.
every mature tree other than like those stick maples and
Yeah.
popples were left. So 12 years ago when we got the property, it was a blank slate. And we actually were lucky enough to have the logger like cut us trails and
That's
had the
smart.
bulldozer out there. So we had him do that right away. And then each year, like you said, we've built off of that. And now, you know, we're very fortunate to be in a somewhat good quality deer management area. But now every year we have an opportunity, I would say, to chase, you know, a Boone and Crockett deer or something of that caliber.
There's giants over there, man.
To be able to say that is pretty amazing. Yeah, there's some dang good hunter. I would say every year within a mile of us, there's a booner killed for sure. And it's kind of between you and I, well, now with the podcast, I mean, there's a lot of let's just say this. I don't want to say too much, but there's a lot of overlooked areas in both Minnesota and Wisconsin that a lot of these deer aren't registered for a reason. A, because people don't want the publicity of it. Are registered in Boone and Crockett, not registered legally. I'm sorry, clarifying that. Sorry. But registered in the record books. But even in Minnesota, selling land, I've gotten to know that a lot of these farmers that shoot these 170, 200-inch deer, they don't want the publicity of it. They don't want people coming in and buying their ground. But there's many areas like that.
I look at it like between, you know, and I've had similar experience, not necessarily into like the selling of land, but doing a lot of like land habitat stuff, and ran an outfitter for a little bit with a couple buddies. And, you know, between like Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, even like South Dakota too, like I would love to know what the number is for when you're talking about like registering deer. Obviously we're for people listening, we're just talking about registering Boone and Crockett or making publicly known that there was a giant shot, you know, because with social media nowadays too. But it's like, I'd love to know the number of Boone and Crockett plus 200-inch deer that have been killed that we don't know about, that have been shot. There's so many.
Year. There is, there is even going down. So I go to the Iowa Deer Classic every year because I got a bunch of friends in Iowa and we do some shed hunting. I think there was 14 200-inch deer that were shot that year on display, and not one of those you publicly heard about. There's people that were happy, you know, and that had some farmers that brought the rack in to get scored and get a ribbon, and that's good enough for them. They don't care about being in the Boone and Crockett, but the 14 in one state in 1 year, that's
crazy.
And like, yeah, obviously everyone knows Iowa shoots giants, but if you look in their record books really lack Boone and Crockett entries.
Yeah.
Because they don't, you know, it's just at the end of the day, and I'm kind of like this too. It's like, it's a score, which is kind of cool to know, but it's just a piece of paper, right?
Yep. No, and that's right. And like I look at even like the buck I shot this year was the biggest buck I've ever killed in my life, and you know I think it grossed like 156 and netted like a 134. Like great, cool. I was at such my wit's end with my hunting season, whereas like I was gonna kill the first spike that came by me because I just wanted meat for my freezer. So it
absolutely.
Was just, but you know, kind of going transition here just a little bit. And I know you do a lot of kind of giving back outside of what you do for like the land habitat stuff. Just tell me a little bit about your involvement kind of in the conservation side with, you know, being involved with, like you're talking about doing these trade shows, Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, the Minnesota Deer chapters, and, you know, just some of that stuff. Just give me a little bit of a run through.
Yeah. So I try to get as involved as I can. I used to be really involved with Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited, the Deer Association, things of that nature too. And obviously, once you have kids, your time gets a little bit more limited. But a big thing that my wife and I actually a few years ago we teamed up with Shields. And we, you know, started helping out with some of these events. Like, you know, they would have like an archery day at Shields and things like that. But a big thing that we both advocate for is just getting kids involved in outdoors. And something that we take pride into doing personally is, you know, some of these kids that didn't grow up around hunting or fishing, like, you know, we'll bring them around to experience those things, you know. A big thing too, a lot of these kids don't, you know, have the family or the equipment and things like that. Whereas, you know, we do. And I think a great method to get kids involved in the outdoors too, it from a hunting standpoint, duck hunting is my favorite way to do it. Cause there's action. You can be loud, you can call, you can throw decoys. Like we took our son for the first time this year too. And like, he just ate it up and loved every bit of it. And he saw ducks get shot, and it's a fun experience. It sucks waking up early, but yeah, so we do as much as that as we can do. We give back to different foundations and things like of that nature too. Greta's family has a big foundation called the Maddie Nelson Foundation. Her cousin passed away of cancer at the age of 18. So a big thing they do every year, they do a big fishing tournament, and in just different ways that we can give back, promote the outdoors, and always be as involved as our time commitment allows too. But that's something that we've always been a huge advocate, and we'll continue doing with family, friends, and even people we don't know. If you got a kid that wants to go fishing or hunting, we'll take them. We'll experience them that. So that's something that I really, because the hunt, believe it or not, and I'm sure this too, is like hunting is kind of dying slowly. Deer camps are dying, the numbers are dying, more kids are not having those experiences, and a lot of technology, social media things. There's a lot of factors go into it, but at the end of the day, like if we can get one more kid kind of experiencing that and get hooked on that, you're gonna create them with lifetime memories and experiences that they won't get elsewhere.
No, I couldn't agree with you more on all that, and we talk about that all the time. And the youth is the most important thing we have. I mean, outside of our kids, obviously we try our best to pass that on, that tradition, but that's the unfortunate thing. There's a lot of kids and families out there that don't have the means to do any of that. And like, we do a youth bow hunt here in Brainerd. I'll have to share the details with you when we get done. But we got an archery camp in town. It's like a lot of these kids have never shot a bow. And then, they come to this camp and they get a chance to get a bow in their hand. Their parents are, maybe not familiar with the sport or what it is. And like, archery is such a great thing, getting kids involved. You don't even have to hunt. And then the best part about it, you get done with this 2 week or 3 week, depending on how many, every year's been a little bit different of, these weeks that we have these kids come out, and then all of a sudden these kids are turning around to their parents like, hey, can I get a bow? And it's like, that's what it's all about. And it's like, that's the circle of life. And I just hope that, people of our age and our generation, I just hope that we can all continue kind of being stewards of where we can keep pushing that narrative, trying to get the next generation in the outdoors, because I'm very thankful for our parents and, the generations before them where, the traditions were a little bit more rich and things were kind of set in stone, where it's like, yeah, it's Wisconsin gun season. Like we're taking the week off and we're going hunting, and making sure that they'll stay alive, because it is a dying breed. And it is something that I hope that we can continue to keep passing on to our kids and the rest of the youth.
Dude, you nailed it. If we got time, I want to share a quick story that my grandpa
for sure
tells me about deer season and things like that. So he played hooky in high school one day, because it was deer season. Usually they had like a certain amount of days off, but anyways, it was like a Monday and he played hooky. He's like, I'm not going to school. It's deer season. I'm gonna go hunt. He went on this chunk of public ground and he started hunting. All of a sudden he saw another guy, and this another guy was standing above a buck. Here is his high school principal. His awesome. Principal also played hooky or called in sick.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
it's like, well, we got a situation here, Bob. And he's like, yep, I won't say anything if you don't say anything. But yeah, I mean, it just,
that's awesome.
And it just like, and that's another thing too. And we could go on for days about like deer camps and the traditions and things of that nature. And it's really sad to see. And I see it every day too, with like some of these deer camps I'm selling up north now, just dying and all of that. All of a sudden you had a group of like 30 to 40 guys, and now there's like 2 guys that just do it to do it. It's that's part of that. Some of that tradition is sad to see. That's kind of dying too.
Well, it's hard with split families that do a lot of hunting too. Like I look at like our family, like my wife's side, we have 40 acres connected to a bunch of potlatch land up in Ray, Minnesota. So just southwest of International Falls. And, they had that deer camp with my father-in-law and all of his brothers, and his dad started that camp. And, as time went on, some of the brothers stopped hunting. One passed away, unfortunately. And then, and now it's down to, my father-in-law and maybe 1 or 2 of the other uncles. And then, their kids kind of hunt, but then, like my father-in-law and my 2 brother-in-laws, they're hunting nuts just like I am. It's like, well, I've got my family tradition that I'm trying to keep alive down in southeast Minnesota. My other brother-in-law is up in Roseau. He's trying to keep his family tradition alive. Sure. And it's like, it's like one of those things where it's like, man, we got to keep this deer camp alive, because these guys have been staying in the shack for literally 60 years. It's like, if we have to go up their second gun season or first week, every other year type of thing of, keeping just keeping that tradition, because like I want her to be able, my daughter to be able to go experience that. I've been up there, a handful of times, and you don't see a whole lot of deer, but it's a fun deer camp.
Right. No, absolutely. And like growing up, we in Minnesota, our deer camp was all the way up in like Silver Bay, Lutz, and I have
Oh,
an
sure,
uncle that
yeah,
owns property that connects to Superior National Forest. So like that's what we would do. We'd just we'd all hike in and find a different trail, and we had a lot of success to it. Obviously, it got harder and harder
yeah,
as things have changed in the Northwoods. We're
yeah.
just gonna say with predators, but yeah,
That's a whole
it's
nother podcast.
yeah, that's another can of worms. But yeah, it's some core memories I'll never forget though. I guess that's where I was getting out with that.
Nice. So just kind of like wrapping things up here a little bit, I do really want to dive into just a little bit kind of the faith piece with you, and just give me just a little bit of just kind of a breakdown, just kind of how that intersects with, just your guys' daily life and just being in the outdoors,
Yeah.
and just give me a little bit of run through with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, to be quite honest with you, I mean, a majority of I grew up very traditional Christian.
Hmm.
When we moved up here too, we didn't, or Lutheran, I should say, we didn't, we, we, we struggled finding or not finding a church, but we church shopped a little bit, and
Yeah,
we
for sure.
finally found a really good one that really connects with our values and kind of us and the kids. But I think that's a huge part that my wife and I have never lost focus of, that still needs to be number one in our household. And it's something, the outdoors and hunting, obviously everyone's passionate about it and stuff. But to me personally, it's been I've been in the woods at some of my highs, at my all time lows. It's been the best way for me to not only connect with God spiritually, but also nature, and kind of, as we all can relate, like that only time that you can just kind of shut off everything and just be present within yourself and nature too. A big thing of my faith in the outdoors too is every time I'm out there hunting and I make the decision to take something's life, like that's a huge thing to me. Is like we're hunting, but we're taking something's life too, and to
Yeah,
be appreciative of that and giving back. And something I do personally too, no matter what I shoot, if it's a duck, a grouse, just take a moment with that animal and giving thanks to the man upstairs, because that's he's feeding our family and he's providing, and we took something's life and to do that. But yeah, I guess that's a huge part of the outdoors and kind of who we are too. Is with all this stuff, without our faith in God, we wouldn't have any of these opportunities or these animals to chase. And
hmm,
making sure that that's appreciated and known not only to us but our kids too, is we have these opportunities because of the man upstairs, and making sure it's given back.
amen to that. Yeah, and we talk about this all the time on our podcast. Obviously, we're a faith-based podcast, but we're an outdoor podcast too. And this is where I think our podcast is unique enough to where we kind of get a different limelight that people normally don't get asked questions like this. So kind of
Absolutely.
like yourself, though. I mean, is that obviously you're involved in the outdoor industry? It's a little bit different to where you're not. It's still a hobby for you, but it's kind of a job too. But are those times that you do get out by yourself, of where you're kind of finding your most peace when you're getting out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the my wife will probably kick me after hearing this, but yeah, like, and when I used to, work different jobs and all the stress in life, like sometimes I would just go sit in a tree and just be content with sitting in a tree. Like I didn't have any expectations to see any things. And sometimes that actually, when you're going out with that more, just to kind of decompress and get away with,
Mhm.
with life a little bit, actually have shot some nice deer, just sitting there and kind of just enjoying it and taking it
Yeah,
all in, putting your phone away and getting away from the hustle bustle of life, and just enjoying what's in front of you, enjoying what's around you. And I think you connect a lot better spiritually when you do that
for
too, because
sure.
there's just, even in our typical days with every technology and just with everything going on too, it's so important to take time for yourself as a man too. I know it's not talked about enough, but a man's mental health
Uh-huh.
it can be all over the place. There's a lot of responsibilities, as being a family man and supporting a family, just to take time for yourself and decompress and enjoy something you like to do, but be entwined, but also just let some of those outside factors be blocked for a little bit. And I think that's what a lot of people use, not as a coping, but as a great tool too, the outdoors can provide.
No, 100% to that. And I think honestly, you know, it's taken, my wife and I have been together for 8 years here this spring, I think, and we've been married for 5 now. And I think she got it right away, but I think, even kind of coming in light, like after my dad passed and stuff too, like how important, like, and it's funny because like the amount of times that I have hunted this year, which is a lot, and I'm incredibly thankful for every moment that she's allowed me to sneak out and go, but of how sometimes though too, like how important that is, and especially for me, and it's different for everybody, but like for me especially, like I gotta have that time to be able to get out and just decompress and just mentally just think of nothing and be at one with nature and be at one with God and just be at
Yeah.
one with the woods. And like there's something so magical about that to me. And that's where, I just laugh about like that hunt that like last week. And like I had absolutely zero expectation of even seeing a deer. And it just, God provided and it worked out. And it's like that's where I find my most peace is praying in the outdoors and just kind of enjoying it. But just tell me a little bit, like how is your faith kind of shaped where you've come at to be with your career and just being in the outdoors and stuff? Obviously, I feel like he's had somewhat of an integral part of kind of shaping to where you're
Yeah.
at today.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a I love that question too. It's we get busy in life, you get successful in life, but I think it's something that I've kept at the tip and the core is
Mhm.
all these opportunities and all these things that have happened to me is because of him, and being more spiritually connected myself, and leading the family in the direction that we need to be, from a uh you know the spiritual standpoint too. I think ever since I kind of when we had kids and I started making that more of a priority, obviously, some better things have came out of it too. But I just have noticed a lot of not only personal growth but business growth, um, growth in outside in my hobbies and hunting and stuff like that. Once you just get more, I feel like my personal faith journey, once I got more connected and devoted more of my time to God and
Mhm.
to my faith, a lot better things have come out of that. And it's something that we always, you can get too busy, you don't devote enough time. But for me personally, the more time I've devoted, the better results I've gotten, not only within, but personally and my family. And it's something that's always kind of been the tip of my spear now too. Is that something? No matter how busy I get, to always keep that the center point and keep that moving forward. Because at the end of the day, I would have nothing without him. And it's been hard to talk about. It's something I've been kind of um yeah, I guess just growing up too, and men in general, like having faith talks with other men is kind of
Oh
difficult
yeah.
at times, and it's something I haven't really. I've had some friends that are like spiritually connected. My wife is very, I give a lot of props to her because she always kind of pushes me harder and asks some of these questions and things like that that get me to open up more too. But and I'm thankful for that. But I feel like it's hard to talk to some
Mhm.
people about faith that aren't as spiritually connected, and um, that's okay. But I love that you asked that question too, because I feel like there's such a connection, and I have all these devotionals and stuff too with not only nature and the Lord, and um, all those things kind of put in a full circle. We wouldn't have a lot of that, obviously, because of the Lord and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, but that's a great question that I really like. But the short answer is you just got to keep at what's important, keep it at the center point, and keep trucking along with it.
No, I love that. And you said you kind of hit on the head for a couple things too, and especially for me, like life's busy, especially when you throw a couple kids in there and throw you married and you got a full-time job and you're busy doing stuff. And it is amazing how the devil can work and just making our lives busy and making us to where you forget to do stuff where it's, man, I feel like I forgot to pray this morning. I forgot to do this. I forgot to read my devotional today. And you just get caught up in the whirlwind of just life, and
Hmm.
distractions. And like, I think God just really seeks for us to just take that moment of solace of where it's just like, even if it's just a 30-second, just, hey, checking in, seeing how you're doing, like that just means the world to him. And I know that, and I'm guilty, and we're all sinners, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
we're all forgiven of our sins. And that's where I think for me, like why hunting and just being outside is such a connection piece for me, because there is nothing going through my mind. There is nothing, there is no
Yes.
distractions. I put my phone away, put it in my backpack, and it's just
Yes.
like I have nothing happening. Why not? And like I have a little Bible that my dad had that he always had with him that I bring with me in my bag, and every once in a while I'll read some scriptures out of that, just kind of go through it. But no, and that's the reason why we're
That's
doing this
awesome.
podcast too, is because like, I feel like hunting is the greatest connection tool to for the outdoors. I've not all outdoors men or women, I will say, are probably our followers, and I feel like that's was our calling to be kind of fishermen of men. But at the same point in time, I think it's the greatest connection tool. So you could walk into a Shields and see a guy buying a grunt call, and you can ask him about it. And it's like all of a sudden you're best friends because you both love the hunt. But what a greater pathway tool to use that as a power to have like those courageous conversations. And like you talked about, another great point too, like men's mental health, like people don't talk about that enough, and like that needs to be talked about. And like the one gateway to that is praying and just having a connection with God. And that's where I just think spiritually hunting and God just go hand in hand together, and it's just the best.
For sure. Like I've always said it to my wife too. It's like I'm not just out there aimlessly hunting. I'm connecting, obviously connecting with nature, but I'm connecting with God too. And I think she realized that when she started hunting more too, that she's like, you weren't kidding. I'm like, there's just something being in a tree or outside. Yeah, it's the peace, and you can finally shut off your mind and just really connect, and that's what I love most about it too. Obviously the harvesting the animals is a huge bonus too, but just like your own well-being and own mental health, you're just so entwined with everything at that moment.
I do. The one funny thing I always laugh about all the time, and someday maybe I'll be able to get an answer from God, but it's like those moments where you're in desperation mode and you're praying to see a deer, and just like, man, because like it's like because like that's the one thing I laugh about too, because like God knows your every thought and what you're thinking, and He knows it before you're doing it, and it's just like, all right, I'm gonna be really sincere. Can I just see a deer tonight? But it is funny, like those moments though, like I catch myself where it's just like, God, just like throw it a little prayer. And he wants us to ask for stuff. He wants us to be able to have those conversations with him. And like, those moments where it's like, man, I really hope, I hope I see a deer tonight. Maybe I shoot a deer tonight. And it's like, turn around. It's like, oh, wow, we got deer coming in, but not that it always works because he knows his own plan, but it's a fine dance, man. I just appreciate this conversation that we've been able to have today. And I hope we can have lots more, and hopefully we could get together and grab a beer now that I know that you're local here. For some reason in my head, I was like, God, this guy's a cool guy, but I'm like, he's probably in like Nebraska or somewhere like this. He's not local. You're right out my back door. So we'll have to do another podcast in person, but I just want to tell you, I appreciate you hopping on the day. But before we go, I have a couple rapid fire questions for you, because we always close it out like this. So super short and sweet. First one, what is your go-to gas station snack when you're on the road?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say Casey or Quick Trip or Casey breakfast sandwiches for sure.
Okay, it's clutch.
Depending on where I'm at in the state.
Okay, Casey's or Quick Trip?
Yep.
Which one would you pick though?
Okay, now I'm gonna change my answer. I'd rather have Casey's breakfast pizza.
Okay, it's a solid answer.
Yep.
Okay, so second question: if you get one hunt, bow hunting now, what is the exact date or time of year that you're going to go? You get 1 day.
So just one day to
one day to get her done.
October 27th.
Ooh,
I think I've killed $3 on that date. Yep.
Okay, October 27th. Okay, I like that. So, what is your second animal of choice you'd pursue rather than a whitetail?
A moose. Moose is my dream hunt for sure. Yeah, Yukon moose. Yeah, I've shot an antelope. I guess I've just shot whitetail and antelope. But yeah, I've chased mule deer. Mule deer are fun too. Elk are cool, but like a moose is just, I don't know. It's a king of the forest, man. It's huge.
It is.
It's just
my Alaska moose tag is like burning a hole in my pocket that it's going to happen sometime in the next hopefully 10 years. That's my goal.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a big moose. That's my dream animal.
Okay, so this one's kind of off the wall now. What is your go-to Christmas movie? Ooh, 'tis the season.
That's a good one. I have so many that I like, but A Christmas Story. Like, it's just all right. It's just the OG that I always remember as a kid. And you shoot your eye out.
Love it. Well, cool, man. Well, I mean, I'd love to close out with a prayer if you want to lead us. Otherwise, I can definitely take us in it if you want to.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. Thank you, Lord, for thank you. Yeah. I'm bald now. You're gonna see that. Oh man. No, thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to connect with great people and be on this podcast and discuss not only their faith but the opportunities we've had. And all the success that has been along the way in your name. We wouldn't have any of it without you, and we give thanks every day that we can. And I appreciate, connecting spiritually with these guys, and not only that, being able to discuss our story and all the things that are ahead as well. Thank you, Lord.
Amen. Amen, brother. Jordan, thank you, man. This was a lot of fun, and I think our viewers are really going to appreciate this one. I think like I said, you had a heck of a season. You got a really cool story, and we'll definitely have to get together and grab a beer sometime.
Hey, man, that sounds great. Sorry, I'm a talker, and I can
Same
tell
here, man.
stories
We could me and Luke joke about that all the time. And like, if we didn't, we really don't have a set limit. Like, I look at like Joe Rogan, like they can go for 4 hours, and it's like we probably could do that, but it's like we got families and kids and responsibilities. It's like it's time to get back to doing what we're supposed to be doing. So
no, absolutely. Or even, I don't know how if you guys got like mics and stuff. I've done a few podcasts too. Like we've done them at like Roundhouse, and like they'll block off an area, and just some kind of cooler
Roundhouse
stuff.
That's a cool spot. Actually, it wouldn't be a bad one. I was thinking, actually, from all the local breweries, that's probably the best one. Go upstairs.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So I've done one there, and it just kind of adds like a different twist to it. I don't know if you guys go to the Minnesota Deer and Turkey Classic at all, but we're
going to start going.
Yeah, you definitely should. So I always have a booth there, and cool. And we always do, I do some kind of podcast there too. So if you guys would want to use our booth and do a podcast there and find someone, or even talk to, that draws a lot of people, and it's a great experience and place to do it too.
So anybody that's listening or wants to find out, maybe just give a little plug for yourself of where they could find your contact information if they are interested in doing some habitat work or potentially purchasing some land.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm heavy on, I have a Facebook page, Jordan Yira Land Specialist. I also have an Instagram page, which is Jordan Yira Outdoors. And then Woods to Water Realty, or woodswater.com also has my contact information, but I'm probably easiest to get a hold of either social media or my direct cell phone number too, which you'll find on both those sites too. Or you can just look on Google Hunt and Land, and I'm sure you'll see a sign or a number there too. But pretty reachable, pretty flexible. I do travel quite a ways too, so don't be afraid to reach out.
Love it. Jordan, thank you so much. And thank you everybody that's listened, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks a ton, Evan. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through faith in the great outdoors. We hope today's episode has inspired you to seek God's presence in the wilderness and deepen your connection with nature. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to the Wild Faith Podcast on your favorite platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll continue to be a part of the Wild Faith Podcast community. We'd also love to hear from our listeners, so please don't hesitate to reach out with your questions, comments, or topic suggestions. You can connect with us on social media or through our website. Your feedback is important to us and helps us improve and tailor our content to better serve you. And always remember, the great outdoors isn't just a playground for hunting and fishing. It's a sanctuary for finding solace and spiritual renewal. As you gear up for that next adventure, I pray you find God's presence in the crackling of a campfire, the thrill of reeling in your catch, or the quiet solitude found in nature. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Wild Faith Podcast. Take care, and God bless.